Welcome to Flippening, the first and original podcast for full-time, professional, and institutional crypto investors. I'm your host, Clay Collins. Each week, we discuss the cryptocurrency economy, new investment strategies for maximizing returns, and stories from the front lines of financial disruption. Go to flippening.com to join our newsletter for cryptocurrency investors and find out just why this podcast is called Flippening.
Clay Collins is the CEO of Nomics. All opinions expressed by Clay and podcast guests are solely their own opinion and do not reflect the opinion of Nomics or any other company. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be relied upon as the basis for investment decisions.
Today, I'm joined by Ivan Poon, co-founder and CEO of the Switcheo Network. Switcheo is the world's first consumer-grade and multi-chain decentralized cryptocurrency exchange, allowing users to trade across multiple different blockchains. I should note that Switcheo recently completed a deep data integration with Nomics.com. With this integration, Switcheo receives an A+ exchange rating on Nomics and certifies them as among the most transparent exchanges in the crypto asset space. In this episode, we discuss Switcheo's origin story, how to market a crypto exchange, and the future of decentralized exchanges. This conversation is broken up into 7 chapters. In chapter 1, we discuss what Switcheo is and how it's positioned in the market. In chapter 2, we explore which parts of the Switcheo exchange are on-chain versus off-chain. In chapter 3, we talk about Switcheo's core user demographics. In chapter 4, we look at what it actually takes to grow an exchange from scratch. In chapter 5, we cover the regulatory environment for exchanges. In chapter 6, we dive into Switcheo's business operations. Finally, in chapter 7, we close our conversation by considering the future of decentralized exchanges. We'll get right to this episode in just a second, but before we get started, I'd like to pause for a moment to tell you that this episode is brought to you by the Nomics API and CSV data export service. If you need an enterprise-grade crypto market data API for your fund, smart contract, or app, or if you need historical CSV dumps of trading data from top exchanges or even obscure ones, then consider trying out the Nomics API or our historical data export service. Our API enables programmatic access to clean, normalized, and gapless primary source trade data across a number of cryptocurrency exchanges. Instead of having to integrate with multiple exchange APIs of varying quality, you can get everything through one screaming fast fire hose. If you found that you or your developer have to spend too much time cleaning up and maintaining data sets instead of identifying opportunities, or if you're tired of interpolated data and want raw primary source trades delivered simply and consistently with top-notch support in SLAs, then check us out at nomicsapi.com. Finally, if you'd like to order historical cryptocurrency market data as CSV exports from top exchanges, email us at sales@nomics.com. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled program. Here is my conversation with Ivan Poon from Switcheo. Enjoy. Let's step backwards and hear a little bit about the origin story of Switcheo and also your background prior to Switcheo. Did you feel like you had a unique perspective on the space? Was there something that you wanted to see exist that didn't exist already? What's kind of the founding narrative around Switcheo?
So me and my co-founders, we came into the scene around the same time as when Ethereum started their initial ICOs around 2014, 2015. So that's when we started getting invested in the technology. We participated in one of the first few ICOs. At that time, we realized, as a lot of other observers realized, that basically, although all the tokens are so-called decentralized, right? You own the private keys to your funds and stuff like that. Basically, you have your mobile wallets, you have your desktop wallets. But at the end of the day, most of the tokens didn't end up on those decentralized components. They all went into the centralized exchanges, be it Mt. Gox last time, and recently Binance, Coinbase, etc. So around a year plus ago, we also started investing in Neo, and that's when we realized that, hey, Ethereum came out with the decentralized exchange concepts, but many other of the new blockchains didn't have that, and that included Neo. We as engineers decided that, hey, we should really just build one because this is the future, right? And that's why we built Switcheo. So Switcheo was like, the name came about because we wanted to call it Switch Neo, right? But then we realized that, hey, if we are going to do this, we're not going to only do this for Neo. The thing is that if any of these other blockchains are to survive, they are to prosper, right? All of them is going to need a decentralized exchange. If not, you kind of defeat the point of having all these tokens or having all these assets on the blockchain. That's why we just dropped the N and we have Switcheo today. So over the past year, I think we've really tried to stick to our vision and we've accomplished what we really wanted to with Neo, Ethereum, EOS. At the end of the day, of course, we intend to transit to a sidechain model so that we can do our cross-chain trading in a more traditional way, basically.
That's interesting about Switcheo is originally Switch Neo, dropped the N, now you're Switcheo. And it sounds like the origin is really, it's probably a good thing that you did get rid of the N because now you are multi-chain and you're not tied to Neo. That's really how I came to hear about Switcheo is really around, is through the Neo ecosystem, but it sounds like you've expanded from there. Let's transition to chapter 1, which is really kind of an overview of what Switcheo is and kind of how your product is positioned in the market. You know, we talked about you guys being one of the first multi-chain decentralized exchanges. Are you, in fact, the very first multi-chain decentralized exchange?
I would consider us to be, if you don't consider any of the proxy token exchanges. Yeah, if you're talking about, say, ButterDex or Komodo, which is basically atomic swap dexes, maybe it's around the same time, but or even BISC, they recently launched. I think we will be the first one that actually has like smart contracts on multiple chains and it's breached by atomic swaps. Yeah, I think that's really a role first.
So you guys are facilitating on-chain atomic swaps presently. Is that correct? Those are being executed on Switcheo?
Correct. So because it's each blockchain that we have, it's basically isolated, right? They validate transactions only within their own so-called domain or whatever they know about, basically all the tokens that they know about. So when you want to basically switch, say, EOS to Ethereum, or say EOS to Neo, you kind of need a different mechanism. And the way we do that is through basically atomic swaps or HTLCs. Sure.
Hey, this is Clay cutting in from the editor's booth to shed some light on what HTLCs are. HTLC stands for hash time-locked contracts. HTLCs are a type of smart contract often used in atomic swaps, which allows users to trade across two different blockchains. For example, to trade between the Ethereum blockchain and Neo without going through a trusted third party. Okay, back to the show.
Generally, the dexes out there is one or the other. If you are atomic swap dex, it's basically slow. You kind of need to understand a lot of things to use it. Or if you are like a smart contract DEX, you are basically only on one exchange and you are kind of isolated. So which to me doesn't make sense for an exchange. An exchange means you kind of want to exchange tokens broadly, right? Not tokens within a single blockchain. And that's why it's always been our goal to basically be able to connect all the blockchains and exchange them without compromising on the decentralized or the non-custodian nature.
You mentioned proxy token exchanges. What are proxy token exchanges?
So there are a lot of exchanges out there which call themselves decentralized. However, they're only decentralized in the governance kind of way, or rather or maybe even the transaction or the matching kind of aspect. What this means is that they run a blockchain that basically there's a bunch of people hosting. It could be using, and the consensus mechanism could be like proof of stake or even proof of authority. It doesn't really matter. Why it doesn't matter is because all these nodes, all they do is to accept trade transactions and match them. However, the tokens, the custody of the tokens aren't actually, there's no real way to transfer that into this other sidechain or blockchain. So basically, all DEXs based on BitShares or Graphenes uses this sort of proxy token model. The Waves DEX also uses this sort of model. And all it actually does is moves the custody of the funds from the exchange into the gateway that converts the tokens. So in a true decentralized exchange, like say, or a true non-custodian exchange like Switcheo or Ether Delta, the tokens are even if the exchange goes away, you can always still withdraw your tokens. However, in a system like that uses proxy tokens, you're still relying on the fact that once you're done with the exchange, the gateway will honor the proxy tokens, the tokens that you're trading, and then convert it back into the main chain tokens. So all you're moving you're just moving the trust from the exchange, the broker, right, to the gateway. I don't see them as truly being non-custodian. And I think for exchange, that's actually the most important thing. I would think that's why people prefer decentralized exchanges over centralized exchanges if they ever have that preference, is because they're afraid of the risk involved of basically leaving funds on the exchanges.
So when you think of Switcheo, architecturally, is it 3 exchanges being united by one UI, or is it really architecturally one exchange from your perspective?
I think there are many components. So somewhat correct in the sense that there are 3 exchanges, but I wouldn't call them exchanges. I call them more like vaults. So the vaults still remain on the individual blockchain, so that the custody of the funds or that the tokens are still controlled by the private keys of the traders or the users. But the order matching component is off-chain. And here again, I'm kind of generalizing a little, because for the EOS blockchain, actually, the order matching is on-chain. And the reason we can do that is because EOS has a really fast block time. Whereas for Neo and Ethereum, you need at least 15 seconds. And there is anything above a 1 second block time, we feel it's too slow to execute trades. So the trades are executed off-chain on our basically order matching engine, the Switcheo API, correct? And then the whole thing, of course, is wrapped behind our hopefully very sexy UI, basically.
Your UI is really great. And, as some context for folks who might not have understood that question, I'm referring to the Neo blockchain, the Ethereum blockchain, and the EOS blockchain. And it does strike me that the best way to kind of execute what you guys have executed is not to try and treat all of these blockchains the same, but to take each blockchain on their own terms and implement your exchange in the way that's sort of best adapted to those blockchains, which is exactly what you did. And it was really interesting to hear you say that, I believe you said the order book and the matching engine for EOS is on chain because they can handle that throughput. So in that instance, you did take the opportunity to do it on chain, but with the others, you didn't. So you are very much adapting your implementation to the strengths and weaknesses and perhaps peculiarities and idiosyncrasies of these various blockchains.
Definitely. If you're an engineer at Switcheo, you get to explore a lot of basically almost all the blockchains, and each of them really have their own unique strengths and weaknesses. They have their gotchas. They have certain nice aspects about them. Yeah, they're kind of quite different. And we really try to design the underlying layer based on that. Of course, I mean, for us, it would be nice if all the blockchains are identical, but that's not how it actually works. And so we spend quite a lot of engineering time understanding the blockchains actually to really get the best result that we want.
I once listened to an interview with one of the product leaders at Evernote, and they were saying that they have an iOS team, they have an Android team, they have sort of a web-based team, and they don't require consistency across the UIs of these different platforms because each of them kind of have best practices for implementing UI, and that they'd be constraining these teams in a way that kind of makes for a worse product if they strive for and sort of force consistency across the board. Do you guys have separate teams for Neo, EOS, and Ethereum, or do engineers work across the various blockchains as the need arises?
Kind of. So we have specialists in certain blockchains, but at the end of the day, we are quite a small team. So basically, every engineer will know kind of the differences between each of the blockchains. For example, Neo uses UTXOs, Ethereum uses accounts, EOS, it's even more complicated, where you have CPU, RAM, etc. So it's really a yes and no kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'm sure when it comes to the smart contracts that execute these things are probably pretty critical. So you probably need specialists in those areas. But when it comes to a lot of the other functions, it's fine to have generalists or full stack or multi-stack engineers.
Yep.
Are there any kind of pros and cons of the various blockchains that you think are notable, in addition to your comment about being able to have the order books on EOS? And are there any other differences like that where you found one, a given blockchain is particularly strong or weak when it comes to decentralized exchanges? And do you see any additional blockchains being added in the future? For example, maybe Tezos, or I don't even know if Binance is going to allow other exchanges to facilitate trades on Binance chain.
That's an excellent question. So basically, I think from an engineering or product kind of a perspective, Ethereum is definitely the leader, in the sense that there's a lot of resources you can use. There's a lot of best practices they can use. And it's basically it's easy to find examples to know what to do and what not to do. However, because it's the first and also the most decentralized, so-called, right? It's actually really expensive if you want to do everything on-chain. That's something we've been looking at and working on, especially recently when the Ethereum blockchain is basically working at almost full capacity. Each trade actually can cost a significant amount of network fees. There are many ways to scale or to improve that. And there are many various teams basically involved in Ethereum trying to solve that as well. Yeah, but it is a concern in the short to mid-term. Actually, that's one of the next things that we are going to work on, even before we do our final sidechain kind of scaling solution, because that's going to take a couple more months. On the other hand, the more so-called centralized blockchains like EOS and Neo are pretty nice in the sense that it's cheaper at the cost of the users basically having to trust that the blockchains actually will run. I mean, they will succeed, and that basically there won't be any Byzantine kind of behavior, right? They do have advantages besides cost as well. For example, in Neo, you can very easily pay the network fee for the user, whereas in Ethereum, it's a lot harder. So what I mean is that when you transfer a token from A to B, you can't have, say, B or even C third party to pay for the transfer, because the Ethereum blockchain is built in a way that assumes that the message sender has to pay for it. And that's one of the things that's hard to work around. And it actually complicates a lot of state channels or off-chain mechanisms by a lot. The way we do order matching off-chain and then settle on-chain is kind of like a state channel architecture. So that's one of the things that Neo and maybe even EOS is good at. Moving on to EOS, it's nice in the sense that it's one of the newest, and therefore it took a lot of good things it took a lot of learnings from Ethereum and Neo. For example, it has a very robust permission structure. It allows different people to pay for different things, even in a single transaction. One thing we realized at the end of the day is that it may have been a bit too complicated for basically general users. For example, just to create an EOS account, you actually need EOS. And then you kind of need to buy it off an exchange or something to just create a wallet, which is a bit counterintuitive for users. And there's a lot of little mechanisms like CPU, RAM, which is a blockchain resource, which is confusing for users. And that's why on Switcheo itself, we abstract a lot of it away, regardless of if you use our Switcheo account feature or if you use your own wallet. That's because we engineered the smart contract in a way that we can pay for the fees, and then we basically take whatever we are spending from the, or we basically add it to the trading fee transparently. So that's good and bad. It's good in the sense that the apps are able to pay for their users and abstract certain things. But if you just present it to the user without any of these abstractions, it's actually quite challenging.
And what about additional blockchains that you are considering adding? Like, I don't even know yet. Can you facilitate trades with Binance Coin or the Binance Chain? Have you considered Tezos? Like, what are maybe the next 2 or 3 blockchains on your list that I'm not asking for specific timeframes, but what's kind of looking interesting in terms of additional blockchains to add?
We have been looking at ontology. That's one of the things we've been looking at. And the reason for that is because of the similarities to Neo. And they do have quite a few tokens, business-related tokens, as well as gaming-related tokens, which we feel might have a market for. Regarding Binance Chain, they built it off Tendermint/Cosmos, but they built it in a way that's very specialized. Basically, you cannot have smart contracts. You can't even do an atomic swap kind of thing, which I feel is a huge mistake. Maybe they'll upgrade it later on, but until then, it's really hard to basically extend or build upon it because it's basically a closed-off chain. It's almost completely centralized, basically. So until they expand on it, it's kind of it's not really the direction we are heading towards.
What about Stellar? Have you looked at Stellar and the possibility of facilitating trades on the Stellar network?
So Stellar, it's interesting and it's definitely a possibility. I think the only issue for Stellar is, again, it's very customized for only trading. It does allow, it's a bit more open in the sense that anybody can be kind of like a so-called relayer. But then most of the tokens on Stellar, I believe, are also proxy tokens. That was one of the things that we didn't really like. So Stellar was built as a asset kind of exchange where you basically have anybody that can create a token and then it's backed by whatever BTC or even other assets. However, that kind of moves the trust model to the gateway, which may, in our opinion, may be even worse because now you don't even know who's the gateway that you're trusting will basically send you back the main chain tokens once you're done trading. So, but it's something that we have been looking at as well.
Let's move on to chapter 2, where we explore each aspect of your exchange and discuss whether or not that component is on-chain or off-chain. Let's start off with custody. Is that on-chain or off-chain?
Yeah, as we have been talking about this. So this is completely on-chain for all the 3 blockchains so far. Yeah.
Next, order books and matching engines. Are those on-chain or off-chain? I know you mentioned that for EOS, it's on-chain. I take it for Ethereum and Neo, it's off-chain.
Yes. Interestingly, at first we built the Neo version on-chain as well, but we upgraded the contract and we moved it off-chain because we really didn't like the weighting aspect. We felt that if we wanted to compete with decentralized exchanges, we need to at least match their trading experience, where once you trade, you confirm, and then you have the result almost immediately.
So obviously, settlement happens on-chain, but what about trade execution? Is that on-chain or off-chain?
So there's 2 parts to this. So the matching is done off-chain, but all the trade executions are replayed on-chain for all 3 blockchains. That guarantees that every transaction made is every state transition. It's basically signed off by the users and it's validated by the smart contracts.
I see you offer two order types, limit orders and market orders. Does the fact that, kind of trade, that the matching engine is off-chain, does that mean that you could potentially make available as many order types as you'd like? Is that correct?
Because the trade settlements are still done on-chain, some of the order types are more tricky to do. For example, a trailing stop. A trailing stop requires it's basically something where your order only executes when the price reverses or increases by a certain ratio or by a certain amount. And this kind of needs additional proving to prove that this trade can be executed. And this will all have to be on-chain. But we do have a long-term solution for this. And this is really through something that we are developing, which is a sidechain which generates zero-knowledge proofs. And then so there's a bunch of, basically there'll be, say, n transactions that are batched up, and then they'll be put on-chain as a single transaction. So it solves both the scalability issue in the long term, and it also solves the issue where complex order types are hard to basically prove, or they are too long to compute on-chain.
Would you need 3 sidechains? One for each of the blockchains, or could you do that with one sidechain?
No, currently we believe that we are kind of in the alpha to beta kind of stage. But at this point, we believe we can do it with a single sidechain. And that actually allows a full order book kind of trading across chains. There's a few technical aspects, but I wouldn't really go into it. Right now, the main research is into how we can make sure that deposits on, say, chain A, can be trusted by, say, chain B. But other than that, single side chain will be able to solve all these issues.
That's incredible. I was convinced that I was going to get flack from my listeners for even asking that question. Just the second it left my mouth, I was like, that's stupid. You can't have one side chain for, that works across these three blockchains. But it sounds like that is possible. Let's see. Identity, is that on-chain or off-chain, or a sort of a non-existent first-class citizen within the system?
By identity, the only identity the blockchain knows of is basically his address or his public key. If you're talking about like real life identity, we don't do any KYC at the moment. But if we need to, then there would definitely be a decentralized solution as well, meaning that we will use a DKYC sort of provider.
On your website, it looks like there's an OTC option. How does OTC work at Switcheo? Is that essentially a place for someone to post an order and someone to take the other side of that? Or is someone calling up a desk with you guys and you guys are taking one side of the trade? How does that work?
So it's kind of both. We have an OTC platform that basically uses the same smart contract. And this can be used as like a trusted middleman, or basically a middleman that you definitely can trust because it's the same smart contract that you use for trading. And from there, you can basically swap tokens with your counterparty without basically finding a human middleman. And so that's the primary purpose of our OTC platform, to provide users to do this kind of OTC swaps in a very safe manner.
Hey, I wanted to pause for a second to let you know that this episode of the Flippening Podcast is brought to you by the Nomics API and CSV data export service. And as a sponsor and producer of this podcast, I wanted to give you an announcement that I'm doing a webinar every weekday on crypto data and how it works. You should join me. The webinar is called Crypto Market Data 101, Fake Volume, Exchange Spam, and How the CD Market Data Underworld Actually Works. On the webinar, we discuss 1, how exchanges use exchange volume spamming and ticker stuffing to spam CoinMarketCap and other aggregators. 2, what everyone is getting wrong about transparency and fake volume. 3, why most price aggregators are displaying bad data. 4, the 3 types of pricing data and why everyone is using the wrong one. And finally, the 2 transitions you must make in order to move from inaccurate crypto data to good crypto data, and much, much more. To join me on a webinar, go to nomicswebinar.com. Again, that's nomicswebinar.com. Okay, back to the show.
The other part of it, the OTC desk, it's a separate thing where we basically help match users to each other, because we have exchange, then we basically have a lot of connections, we have a lot of contacts with both buyers and sellers. So we basically just link them up and we just get them to use the OTC platform to conduct their trades.
Do you charge an additional fee for that, or is that covered by your standard trading fees?
Yeah, it's covered by the standard trading fees. We don't do we don't have any additional kind of broker fee or whatever.
And so in all of those trades, you aren't party to the trade, right? You're just facilitating matchmaking between counterparties.
Correct.
Let's transition to chapter 3, which is about your core demographic. What kind of users are attracted to your platform? Are you able to reveal the percentage of users that place market orders versus limit orders? I'm super curious.
We don't have a lot of people placing market orders. In fact, as a trader, I don't really like that option. I think it's a bit lazy, and it also encourages bad and unsafe behavior, because there's never ever any guarantee that you'll execute at a price that you're comfortable with, even though regardless of what you're seeing on the order book at that point of time. You can always just use a limit order with a larger margin or lower or higher limit to simulate a market order, but to still protect yourself from sudden movements in the order book. I think most of our traders are quite experienced, and that's why not many people use market orders. I think the key thing is that we are also very friendly for basically beginners and new users, for DEX, for decentralized exchange especially. There's definitely also a large proportion of traders that not so familiar with trading specifically. So we do have finding questions like, why is my order not executed when basically their orders line is sitting on the order book, correct? So this shows that, there are people that manage to use us even though they've never used exchanges before.
Do you have a sense of the percentage of your users that come from an institutional background? Like, I guess I've heard more and more, of institutions or at least hedge funds using decentralized exchanges. Do you have a healthy institutional user base, or are they, primarily kind of altcoin speculators?
I'm not too sure about institutional traders currently, but we do see traders with larger and larger capital coming into our exchange to trade. So that's definitely a good sign. At the end of the day, we need this sort of players to be able to provide us with provide the exchange with the liquidity that attracts more users. So it's basically it's a cyclical thing kind of thing.
Let's kick off chapter 4, which is around exchange marketing and growth hacking. I don't think very much is spoken about what it actually takes to grow an exchange. I think some of us are familiar with affiliate programs and maker-taker schemes, or the strategy of just listing as many coins as you possibly can, without having to necessarily worry about regulation or what is versus isn't a security, and on and on and on. You've been doing this for a bit now, and you've got one of the top and most innovative decentralized exchanges. What have you learned about exchange growth? What do you think are really the core drivers of exchange growth, other than, things like, good UI and good user experience and liquidity? Is there anything above and beyond that you believe is notable?
At the end of the day, of course, liquidity it's king for traders. But to actually build their liquidity, besides paying a ton of money to market makers, so of course you either be the first mover and you absorb all the liquidity, or let's say but only like one person can be the first mover, right? So what we have observed that actually works, that people actually, that you can actually build liquidity from, it's probably branding and perception. So for example, let's talk about Binance. It wasn't the biggest, but they managed to pull away the liquidity, or they managed to become the top. Not really because they are the best exchange, but because they have the certain perception that tokens on this exchange is basically are good, and they will increase in value, etc. And say, like, for our competitor IDEX, I guess they have the perception of the exchange which just lists every single token. And that's why if you need to, say, get rid of certain tokens, that's the default choice for a lot of people. So that's something we are working on also, to have a branding that actually is attractive to traders, or basically that sticks on traders' minds. Exchange liquidity, or really exchange, the user base of exchanges, it kind of follows the power law, meaning that the top, say, 10% has like 90% of the volume kind of thing. And so it is an uphill battle to basically grow in volume and user base. I definitely feel it's not impossible. But of course, the way to go about this is through leveraging on the features and the unique selling points that you have to create that branding and that perception, rather than what a lot of basically pop-up exchanges are doing, which is to churn out fake data to try to get the inbound leads on aggregator sites such as CoinMarketCap. That's something that we obviously don't do, and we think it's really bad for the industry, because it doesn't set a good name for cryptocurrency in general.
Yeah, I remember for a while there, and it might still be this way, there was a Brazilian exchange called Negoci Coins that was at the top of the exchange rankings on CoinMarketCap, and it's like you could call up everyone and they could call up everyone they know. No one's ever heard of Negoci Coins. I had a friend in Brazil And he was like, I live in Brazil, and like this is like the worst crypto exchange in Brazil. No one uses this exchange. So there was just a lot of I think like ticker stuffing. Like, you know, if you have a candle and it's open, close, high, low, and volume, you just inflate that volume number. You just change one number, send it on through, and you're at the top. And it's great to just see what you guys are doing in terms of transparency and such. We're huge fans of that. You know, I think from the branding perspective, what I keep on hearing about you guys is just you're innovative, customer support is solid, really great reputation, and also the fact that you are this multi-chain DEX. I think you guys are sort of the first to have that brand and to come into the public consciousness as someone who's doing that, which is really cool.
Yeah, definitely. So this is something that we want to leverage on and to share with the world. So in terms of our branding and marketing, I think over the next few months, we are really going to push hard on this. We have really cool things in store to share with the wider audience.
So, you know, so I think branding is a factor. What about, it seems like you definitely, or it is possible to develop a loyal base around a token, an exchange token, and you guys have one. Could you share a little bit about the Switcheo token, the strategy around it, what blockchain it actually exists on? Because you have a bunch of markets for it. So it wasn't immediately obvious to me which blockchain you issued it on. Could you share a little bit about that?
The token was issued on Neo simply because it was the first blockchain that we worked on. And Neo is I would say it's pretty decent blockchain. It works as advertised now, at least. I think at the start they had some teething issues. But it's only on Neo currently. But once we have like our sidechain, it's possible that we will have a single native token on the sidechain, and that will be used for staking for the validators, basically. So to expand a bit on it, right now the Switcheo token is used very similar to, let's say, Binance Coin, where you can use it as a fee token, and you get a small discount on the trading fee. This is all burnt on chain automatically. But obviously, it's not so easy to do it cross-chain. For example, if you're trading on Ethereum, it's kind of annoying to also need to connect your Neo wallet to pay fees on Neo. So that's something a sidechain can solve very nicely. So that's something we are looking at moving towards. By the meantime, the exchange tokens are basically burnt manually if it's not on Neo, basically in a similar way to Binance Chain. So hopefully we'll be able to move to the sidechain within the next year or so, and then it won't be so incongruent for traders, basically.
I see. At least we have listed on Nomics. I hope this is right, but we show a SWTH to Ethereum market. How are you able to make those trades happen?
I think we mentioned earlier, although we have 3 different blockchains, we can actually bridge liquidity between the different blockchains using in the atomic swap protocol. We have a few chosen pairs that have the highest usage, which includes our token, the SWTH token, which includes, the other tokens that have high usage will be the blockchain native tokens like Ethereum, Neo, etc. So we have a couple of these atomic swap markets, and that allows traders to actually move between the blockchains. And this is done trustlessly using the hash time lock contracts.
Is there anything else that you've found to be particularly useful around exchange growth? Have you done anything with, maybe incentives for market makers? What else has worked?
We do have incentive for market makers. So basically the takers on our exchange pay about 0.2%, 20 bips for basically the trade commission, whereas the maker pays 0 to negative 0.1, basically negative 10 bips. This basically means some of the commissions go from the taker directly to the maker, instead of to us or being burnt. I think it works somewhat in the sense that it attracts people to basically leave orders on the order book, and that allows new users who are coming in who basically just want to execute the trade and move on. It basically attracts them and makes it more useful for them. On the other hand, I think like fee incentives, they are just a complementary thing. It works especially well when you already have a large liquidity pool, but it is something that we intend to keep for a long period of time, because it's still something that we are looking to, basically that we feel that encourages a better order book.
Does Switcheo have an affiliate program?
We do actually have a affiliate program or referral program coming up. We do think it works across all industries. It's very popular for exchanges. In general, from a marketing perspective, I think it's a tried and proven method. So I think within the next month, we should be launching our first phase of the referral program. We're doing this in multiple phases for two reasons. One, it's we want to be able to adjust and adapt to the results. Secondly, also because we don't verify individual identities, we want to make sure that the program is robust and yet it's resistant against basically abuse, where people just create accounts and refer themselves and stuff like that.
So how would you do that? That's really interesting. Yeah, I've definitely seen with affiliate programs, people signing up to be an affiliate and then they refer themselves maybe through, another IP address, or there's all kinds of ways to do it. They'll fire up a VPN. How do you prevent against that?
So there's a few things that we're considering. So including doing a partial kind of KYC to make sure that you are a single person, but it's a very unintrusive kind of thing, where we don't want to store your data. But on the other hand, I also don't want to go too in depth into it, because I think we have a few tricks up our sleeves to detect such behavior, and we don't want people to work around it based on whatever we are saying.
Yep, absolutely. And would payments in the affiliate program be made in SWTH or in a token of your choice? How would payment work?
Both. I think we have something interesting where we might actually do Bitcoin or BTC rewards.
Oh, interesting.
Yep.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and this will work in hand with our Switcheo account, which we are looking at introducing something quite exciting, I guess. Yeah.
I think that's a nice segue into the next line of questioning, which is kind of around Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin dominance is surging right now. There really is no kind of natural way to buy or sell Bitcoin on Ethereum, Neo, EOS, etc., unless you want to use, I believe they're called, I don't know if it's proper to refer to those as, like wrapped Bitcoin. Is that a proxy token? Is that correct?
Yeah, so wrapped Bitcoin is basically a proxy token that's backed by, I think, BitGo. So yeah, we do support the wrapped Bitcoin on our exchange. We are even thinking of expanding it to its own tag, where it's a stable coin in BTC, right? Because we have stable coins in USD. So that's something we're looking at. But the question, of course, is how do you acquire this BTC in the first place? What we feel as traders is that a lot of traders trade against BTC, not so much because they think that BTC is a particularly good coin that they want to keep. It's more that because BTC is the gold standard currently in cryptocurrency. So that's why you trade against it in the same way that you trade most other things against USD. So BTC as a quote token, it's mainly useful because of that. But at the same time, I feel that a lot of these traders don't actually have BTC wallets. They don't actually even know how to transfer BTC out in and out of the exchanges. And Ethereum actually has a lot more actual user wallets. So that's something that's some interesting things that we have discovered. So I think the actual impact of not having BTC is not that great for our exchange, but at the same time, something that we are we're actually looking into to support that. Short of revealing like something that we may or may not launch. That's all I kind of want to say at this point.
It does seem like, when it comes to atomic swaps, there's been just a ton of work with BTC, like on the BTC blockchain. Do you think that's something that you guys will facilitate at some point? Like, maybe an ETH to BTC swap, or some way to kind of exit back to BTC in a way that's native to that blockchain?
Yeah, so that's actually why we are looking at supporting BTC on the Switcheo account. The Switcheo account is basically this non-custodian wallet that you can actually create from the Switcheo exchange interface. Yeah, we are looking at supporting BTC there because we do see a possibility for swapping, say, BTC to WBTC or even BTC to EOS version of BTC. So that's definitely a possibility. But what our main concern is, again, proxy tokens. We want to make sure that it makes sense to us and to the users. We don't want to reduce the security or the trustlessness of basically BTC itself. That's something we try to avoid being part of.
How would that happen though? Like, would atomic swaps, when you evaluate atomic swaps versus proxy tokens, which one feels more appealing to you?
Definitely, we will use atomic swaps. The problem is that when you swap Bitcoin, you can do an atomic swap with Bitcoin, but the opcodes that Bitcoin support are not really enough to lock them in a robust fashion. So if you want to do BTC to Ethereum, that's definitely possible to do trustlessly. But let's say if you want to do a BTC to wrap BTC, then you kind of need to trust that this wrap BTC can be swapped back to BTC later on.
Is the plan to do both, or do you think at some point you're going to side with sort of native tokens versus wrapped or proxy tokens?
We always favor not using proxy tokens. But then again, if the market wants it, it's also kind of not our call to say that no, you can't use proxy tokens, right? Yeah, but we want to give the choice to not use proxy tokens, which right now there isn't such a choice, basically.
When it comes to exchange growth and exchange operations in general, do you have relationships with other exchange owners? Are there conferences that exchange operators go to? Is there an association, or is most of this stuff just kind of trial and error, kind of observing what other companies are doing? Or is there kind of a mastermind or sort of a group of power players that get together and swap notes about how to run this very kind of new business model? Maybe not sort of when it comes to the fundamentals of exchanges that have been around for a long time, but so there's a lot around regulation, jurisdiction, kind of the technical aspects, scaling. Do you have a group of peers that you interact with?
Yeah, so there's no like secret council of like cryptocurrency exchange. Yeah, but I guess we do know quite a few exchanges. We know our competitors. At conferences we meet each other. I mean, in general, whichever industry you're in, that's bound to happen. I do know that some exchanges have a closer relation to other exchanges, and some are more competitive. But it's very, I would say, it's typical of businesses in general, or industries in general. You have like friends and enemies. But in terms of learning and picking up stuff, I think basically we all just very on our toes. At least the survivors now are people who adapt quickly and are able to catch on to trends, are able to understand why things work and why things don't work. And of course, the best exchanges have traders or traders in traditional market to give their experience in terms of how things should and shouldn't be.
Let's move on to chapter 5, which is about the regulatory environment. We've seen almost everyone now become affected by this. I remember when Shapeshift announced that they'd be implementing KYC AML, and of course, layoffs followed. I don't know if they're correlated. They claim that they're not. And, IDEX has started implementing KYC AML. Binance is now geofencing out the United States. So this regulatory train seems to continue rolling. it strikes me that you guys do have a pretty fierce, like there is, when I think about branding again, it does feel like you are very dedicated to trustlessness, to decentralization, and that part of that just historically has been, lack of KYC, AML, privacy, stuff like that. Do you have an official statement or posture vis-a-vis regulation and identity checks, surveillance, things like that?
So I think there's quite a few concepts here which are kind of distinct. Yeah. So for example, anonymity isn't really the same as decentralization. That's one thing. I believe in decentralization. One of the possible outcomes for full decentralization is that it's hard to stop and censor. That's correct. But that's not really my goal. And because I don't partake in activities that would require that in particular, and in Singapore, we don't face such financial censorship as in other countries might have. So that's not something that I typically focus on. But at the same time, for me, decentralization, it's the important aspect is that we don't have to trust people just because that's the only option. That's my main goal. So that's the decentralization aspect for me. On the other hand, regarding regulations and KYC, I think it's a bit onerous to require businesses to collect data on basically very personal data of their customers. At the same time, as the regulators are sometimes correct, there are certain aspects of cryptocurrency or blockchain technology that can be used to facilitate hiding certain sort of financial transactions. But I think as I mentioned at the start of the interview, Switcheo itself and the model, the architecture that we use doesn't actually allow that. You can't actually hide your transaction. You can't actually hide your trace anymore from just sending basically Ethereum blockchain transactions directly to different wallets. So I don't see an aspect currently where we will facilitate basically such criminal or such money laundering kind of transactions. I do see why certain so-called exchanges like Shapeshift or Binance can possibly contribute to obscure transactions simply because they support privacy coins like Monero, Zcash, etc. So the moment you do that, you're basically at an exit point, which if, say, the regulators want to track, they are unable to. I think it kind of makes sense for them in a way to try to protect themselves. But at the same time, I only say this because I am experienced, and I'm experienced in the field, and I actually understand what somebody trying to hide his trace will do, whereas the regulators don't actually understand these sort of things. And I guess that's why whatever they say is always very broad. And as a result, a lot of people react in a very broad fashion as well.
Let's transition to chapter 6, which is on Switcheo's business operations. Let's dig into that. Love to hear a little bit about, where your corporate entity is domiciled, size of the team. Are you distributed or are you in one office together? Could you tell us a little bit about just kind of how you're set up and team size and daily operations?
Basically, almost the entire team is located in Singapore. A lot of us are also Singaporeans, so we are like local to Singapore, which is kind of different from a lot of other exchanges which from China, and they simply register in Singapore because of regulations or whatever. So we are all in Singapore. We have a size of like about 15 right now, 15 going to 20. So the people that are not in Singapore, they are remote, mostly our support and our support staff and our CM, and that's how we provide round-the-clock support. Basically, we make sure that every time zone is covered.
What are your day-to-day activities involved? I mean, it sounds like you're clearly a technologist. Do you spend most of your time working with the engineering team and the product team?
Yeah, so at the start, obviously, in the start, a lot of things done by the co-founders. So a lot of the original exchange code, a lot of the original smart contracts were built by me and my co-founders. But nowadays, I do more high-level strategic decisions, like what's the correct direction to build our product, what's the engineering architecture that we should go for. And then my team executes on that.
Let's move on to chapter 7, which is about the future. You've mentioned a sidechain that can unite the three chains you work with. You've mentioned some additional blockchains that you support. Is there anything else that you think is noteworthy or should be mentioned about either the future of Switcheo, the future of decentralized exchange in general? Where do you see the ship heading?
I feel that the reason decentralized exchanges are more popular, primary reason at the end of the day is that they cannot support the same feature set as easily and as quickly as centralized exchanges. But I think it's a matter of time before that actually it's possible. I think what Switcheo is doing is really to be the first decentralized exchange to overcome all the hurdles, be it UI, the feature set, be it the UX, and really become the iPhone of exchanges. We believe it's possible. There's many things that traders want, and yet a lot of this are only solved on centralized exchanges. But at the end of the day, with our sidechain and whatever we are building, the vision that we are moving towards is really this whole package that on the surface seems very simple, but beneath it has all the learnings, all the technology that basically has accumulated over all these past few years.
Well, that concludes our conversation with Ivan Poon from Switcheo. I hope you enjoyed it. Before you go, I want to mention that since we've started producing episodes at a much higher rate and a much faster clip, we now have room for a few more sponsors. If you like the work that we do and would like to support the show, then a sponsorship might be a good fit for you. I can say from our own experience that flippening sponsorships work. Each and every time we put out an episode of this podcast, we mention our own API. And to date, every single one of those advertisements has resulted in at least one new customer. In fact, we would do these shows even if nobody else sponsored because of the business it brings to us. And over 80% of paying customers mention that they heard of us through our podcast. If you're interested in sponsoring the show, please hit us up at support@nomics.com. All right, that wraps up things for this week. Stay tuned for next week's episode. Until then, take care. That's it for this week. To sign up for our free crypto investing newsletter, listen to other episodes, or get the show notes from this episode, please visit flippening.com. I also invite you to check out the startup that funds this podcast, Nomics, spelled Nomics, at nomics.com. Finally, if you got value from the show, the biggest thing you can do to help us out is to leave a 5-star review with some comments and feedback on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.